let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
As the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed,
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Administrator Office Hours live stream. As always, that's a mouthful, and I am extremely happy to be joined by my co-host, Johnny. Happy Wednesday.
Hey, how's it going, man? Happy Wednesday to you. It's been a good week.
It's a great day at Red Hat, right? Every day is a great day at Red Hat. So
That's right. Drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. Hey, it's been a while since I was at New Hire, right? New Hire is where we get all the Kool-Aid.
That's right. Yeah, I did mine. Oh man, 6 years this summer. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's I was interviewing somebody yesterday, and they asked me how long I'd been at Red Hat, and I had to think about it. And it's been like 3.5 years now. It's kind of crazy.
Time flies.
Time flies when you're having fun. Although I tell you what, it's my wife, who is an amazing woman for many reasons, not the least of which she chooses for some reason to put up with me. She's a fitness instructor, right? And I decided I was going to go to one of her courses. You know, she does like one of those. It's like Orange Theory or one of those.
Mm-hmm.
I have felt every moment of every day since I went there Monday, and it's pain. I don't know how, and I didn't know this when I went there. It's one of those like all women's gym things. I had my butt absolutely kicked. It hurts to move my shoulder. So
Yes, that's awesome.
I have felt every single moment. Yeah, Pure Bar, yeah, Stephanie. Yep, that's again similar concept to that. They those women they're impressive. I'll leave it at that. All right. Well, so for everybody joining us today, thank you so much. We do appreciate you viewing us. So this is one of the office hours live streams here on Red Hat Live Streaming, which means that we are here to answer any and all of your questions. So if you ever had a professor, a manager, anybody like that who had an office hour where you could come in and just talk about whatever you wanted to talk about, that's what we're here for. So you are welcome to send any of those questions on whatever platform you happen to be watching us on, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Twitch, whatever that is. We'll get all of those chat messages, restream here in the background. You know, it cross-posts them to everything, so we get to see all of them. And we're happy to address those as you ask them. And we'll do our best to answer them here on the stream. If we don't have an answer for you, then we'll take that offline and we'll follow up with whoever we need to on product management or maybe our peers on our teams, engineering as the case may be, and we'll get that all taken care of. So I was watching the Level Up Hour earlier, and somebody came in at like the last minute and asked a question like as they were going off air. So hopefully they saw my message to send me a message, but I guess we'll see. So in the absence of any questions, and again, please don't let today's topic change any questions that you have in mind. But in the absence of any questions, we always have a theme or a topic that we talk about with each one of our streams. And today, that is OpenShift 4.10. And in particular, we're going to be focusing on some things that Johnny and I feel are important to you all, to our administrator audience. So if you didn't see the What's New in OpenShift 4.10 live stream, so that happened 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Yep. That was broadcast here on Red Hat Live Streaming. You can see all of that stuff. There's a What's New and Next link. Let me dig up that link. Next and New. We have
I got it for you if you want it.
Handy shortcut. I'll post that on Twitch over here. So you can click that link that I just posted in there. That'll take you over to a landing page that has both the What's New and the What's Next. So What's New would be what's happening in the next release. So 4.10 in this case. What's Next would be the roadmap. So the roadmap is going to be looking out more like 6 to 12 months and all the things that are happening there. And they do usually have an abbreviated roadmap slide in the What's New, but they don't focus on it too much. Khalid, very much to your point, it was a dense session. They always have a tremendous amount of information that's in those. We've actually been talking about whether or not it would make sense to maybe reorganize how we do that presentation a little bit. We do it currently based off of kind of features and I think it's Conway's law, right, where communication happens based on the organization layout. So you can, if you follow along, you can kind of see how the teams are broken out. And one of the suggestions I had, quite selfishly, because you all are an administrator audience, I'm an administrator, is maybe we should do it by personas. So have developer centric things and administrator centric things and that type of stuff, and do it that way. So we'll figure it out. Hopefully it'll come out for the better. So thank you, Stephanie, for posting that link in there as well. All right, so let's see. We've got just a ton of stuff to get through, so I don't want to spend too much time on our top of mind topics today, Johnny. Because there's just 4.10 is packed full of stuff. For anybody who, Khalid, as you mentioned, right, who watched that, what's new. So let's talk about it. All right. So top of mind topics. A couple of things here. So one, if you are not familiar with the assisted installer, we've done a couple of live streams on it. It's a quick and easy way to get a new cluster spun up inside of your environment. So let me share my screen. And I want to share this window. All right, so what we're looking at here, this is console.redhat.com/OpenShift. So this is just where we go and deploy new OpenShift clusters and all that other fun stuff. So I'm going to go to Create Cluster here, select Data Center, and then I have this Assisted Installer. So Assisted Installer itself, as you'll see here, is Technology Preview, but it is, which means that it's unsupported, but it's still a great way and it works really, really well. Their success ratio is like super high, or success percentage for deployments is super high. But it's a great way to kind of quickly get started deploying a cluster. And the reason why I'm bringing it up today is because they've made some pretty significant changes and updates inside of here. So I'm going to just create a quick cluster here. And one thing to note here, you can select RC versions of OpenShift to deploy. So if you want to try out OpenShift 4.10, which to be clear is not yet released, the bits are not available in a GA status, they are only RC. So if I wanted to deploy a 4.10 cluster here with RC6, I can choose that. If I want to do a single node OpenShift, remember that single node OpenShift is, or if you were deploying a GA version of OpenShift, it would only be supported when deployed natively to physical servers. But as you all have seen on the stream, you can deploy it to VMs. It'll probably work. It's just not a supported deployment yet. But you'll notice some other things here. So down here, we've got like this enable encryption of installation disks for both control planes and compute nodes. And if I click next here, the biggest reason why I wanted to highlight this to y'all is they have added some other things here. So we've got this integrate with vSphere. So when I click the add host here and I go through the process and I download the ISO, I can then provision my virtual machine, my VMware virtual machine. I boot it using that ISO, and then it'll register itself down here in the host list. If it detects that those are VMware virtual machines, then this option will become available. And what that does is it deploys the cloud provider. So historically, Assisted Installer would only deploy a non-integrated, a platform-agnostic deployment. But now they're starting to integrate with other platforms. So I thought that was really cool. Just another way that we can go through and get all of the stuff that we need, quickly and easily for installation. And I think I don't see it here, which is strange. They have an option here for deploying OpenShift virtualization out of the box too, but they do have OCS or ODF rather. And when you do that, it offers you the option of like which host do you want to use for ODF and all that other stuff. Which devices do you want to use for ODF? So really nice method for deploying clusters if you have the chance.
And that's an awesome upgrade too. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, because like I think when a lot of people do the single node, they don't realize like, okay, I have to actually configure the local storage operator and then patch the registry so that way it'll start working. There's a lot of those things I think that are just kind of like ambiguous, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and so I mentioned that the assisted installer itself is tech preview. The clusters it deploys are fully supported, right? So if you and the engineering team that's behind this, they're super good about, helping with those things. So if you encounter an issue, open a BZ, and more than likely they'll get to it pretty quickly. They're really awesome about helping out folks.
And Andrew, we have a question from Rockhound1 about is the assisted installer supported in disconnected or air-gapped environments?
So no, there are some Red Hat folks who have figured out how to do that. So Johnny, I'm sure you've seen on some of the internal chat rooms, right, where folks will say, "Hey, here's my process for doing that." Ken is one of those folks, but officially no. That being said, like further out on their roadmap, I know that that's something that they're looking at, and they're looking at doing some really cool things there. So for any Red Hatters who are interested, send me a message, and internally I can share some resources with you for what they've got planned.
And then there was another question from Fahad about the node tuning operator. Is if you make a custom change, is that supported through an upgrade? So if he goes and he changes the tuning operator and then he does an upgrade, is that supported as well?
As far as I know, yes. So is it better to do pod or node label selectors? That one I don't know that there is it's a subjective thing rather than a objective thing. So yeah, as far as I know, no tuning operator through upgrades is safe to do. That being said, I would say pay attention to the release notes, because periodically we will rebase CoreOS to new RHEL versions. So right now I think it's RHEL 8.5 based, 8.4, 8.5, and it'll have in the release notes when it changes which one it's based on. So if you're concerned about any issues, right, if you're setting anything in, via the node tuning operator that might be affected by a RHEL upgrade or a RHEL version change, just be cognizant of that. Let's see, just scrolling through chat real quick. I'm going to trust you to raise up any chat questions.
One that I almost missed. It was from Karate Chop. +1, I just wanted to say that username. It's from Karate Chop. And has anyone gotten OKD to work with the assisted installer?
I don't think so. I would check on the Kubernetes Slack, so kubernetes.slack.com. So there is an OpenShift users room in there. I would go and check in there. I know there's some folks who have been trying it, but I haven't been following it closely, so they may have succeeded.
Awesome. And I think we're caught up. I answered the Raphael was asking about defining ingresses. Yes, you can define an ingress. Just know that you can define an ingress all day, but a route is going to be automatically created. So just so you're aware of it. Yep.
Okay, so let's see. Moving on. How to rotate the kubeadmin password. Kubeadmin. I'm gonna flip flop, and I'm gonna equally offend everyone there. So if we switch over here, and I'm going to post this link into Twitch real quick.
I was actually going to point to this blog too.
Yeah. So Andy Block, who has been a guest here on the stream before, he was here when we talked about the registry and all that other stuff internally, the internal OpenShift registry. So he posted a blog here about how to rotate the OpenShift kubeadmin password. So generally, we make this kind of blanket recommendation that you should consider removing the kubeadmin user. That being said, I don't know how many folks actually do that. So this was super interesting to me. And when he highlighted that he had posted this, you see, it's July 15th, right? So middle of last year, of, hey, if you want to keep the kubeadmin user, but you want to change the password, here's how to do that. And it walks through that, pretty base or pretty easily. So what we see here is this OC abstract. So it'll get the currently encoded password. There's no way, there's no way that I know of to decode that or reverse that into something usable. And then he has some Go code here that walks through how to change it. And if you're like me, I don't have Go installed anywhere or anything like that, but he has this helpful Go playground thing. So literally all we have to do is click run here, and it will generate, if I can scroll up, it'll generate a new password, right? So here's the password in plain text. Here's the base 64 encoded version of the hash. And then if we flip back over here, he has a very helpful patch command where you just inject that. And then after a few seconds, everything resets in the auth controller, and you've got a new kubeadmin password. So I thought that was super interesting. There's also a KCS that we can dig up that's on how to create new kubeadmin certificates. So when you deploy OpenShift, right, in the auth directory, you have that kube config. So you can rotate those certificates. You can also create new ones. So I can create one for my user account, for example, if you wanted to do that. And we'll dig that up when we have a moment.
Andy Block is like nerd goals, like it's like the status you're trying to get to.
Yeah, he's a machine.
Yeah.
So the last thing I've got here, and then Johnny, you wanted to talk about Podman is so we I got tired of having to go to YouTube and search and find all of the stuff for our streams. So I created a short link. So very simply, if you go to https red.ht/AOA, I just posted that into Twitch. So if we go to red.ht/AOA, it's a very simple redirect over to our playlist here on YouTube. So for anybody who's curious, if you want to go and see Johnny and I embarrass ourselves on a weekly basis and see the history of all of that, there you go.
Documented history. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, and then Johnny, Podman 4.0.
Yeah, so Podman 4.0 just released. There's, you can read the full release statement there, but there's the big changes that I took away from that are they did a rewrite on the network stack for performance. So there's a lot of like major changes that are coming out in Podman to just make it more better, but really just to make it more performant on the desktops or the client side rather. And then within there's a lot of support for Windows and the Mac OS. So if you kind of kept up with the last release, they changed it over to like Podman machine to spin up a machine on the Mac OS, so that way you could run Podman. So there's better integration with that, where now you can use like a Docker Compose with it, so it opens up the host socket to Podman. And then on the Windows side, they're running it all in the WSL2. So a lot of big changes. If you're a Windows user, now you can use Podman pretty much exclusively. I think it's actually in there in the next release 4.1. There's going to be more support for volume mounts to a Windows machine. So, stay tuned. It's coming. Podman's a great tool to use, especially if you're trying to get, I don't want to say it in a negative light, but if you're trying to get rid of Docker or you're trying to go to like a rootless runtime, then Podman's definitely, pretty good for that.
I'll tell you, inside of my house, I use certain things for just convenience, right? So Christian's helper node being one of those, and I use a lot of Podman based services. But for some things, I had been avoiding moving from Docker to Podman because of Docker Compose. I have them in a Docker Compose format. Well, it turns out that as of Podman 3 or 3.1, there's like a Podman Docker service and socket you can start. And then Docker Compose just works with Podman. I thought that was awesome. So I've been converting everything over to run off of Podman inside of my own lab.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love Podman. I've been using it for a long time, and it's just it blew my mind when I was like, "What's a Podman? No way, a pod is like." So it's pretty awesome. Khalid, we do have something similar to that coming up. I don't know if it's going to be Microshift on Podman, but it's definitely going to be Microshift. So we do have an episode coming up on Microshift. Yeah. Maybe we can nudge them a little bit to try and do some Podman magic.
Yeah, that's a mea culpa on my part, in that I had reached out to the Microshift folks and said, "Hey, it'd be awesome if you could join us." And they said, "Sure, we'd love to join you. March 2nd sounds great." And I completely forgot about it. And we had scheduled and prepared this stream. And then yesterday they reached out and they're like, "Hey, are we still joining?" So we've rescheduled them. They'll be joining us in 2 weeks. So next week, I don't remember what next week's topic is, but we've got a bunch of interesting stuff coming up. We've got Service Mesh coming up. We've got Microshift coming up. We sat down and did our kind of loose penciled in planning for out through July, I think, yesterday. So yeah, be sure to subscribe to whatever channel you happen to be following us on, because you'll get the full list of all the stuff that we've got coming up.
Yep. And Pete, real quick, I'm sorry. Pete, just so you know, I don't know if they I don't think they rebranded Podman or Docker Compose to Podman Compose. The way that the release statement read is that essentially you can now run your Docker Compose against Podman on a Mac OS and Windows machine.
Yeah, and Docker Compose, like regular Linux Docker Compose, it's just you literally run Docker Compose, and then whatever magic in the background happens with Podman and the Podman Docker socket / service, and it behaves exactly the same. So I'm not a super advanced Docker Compose user, but hopefully hopefully it will work for most of those, if not all of those use cases.
Mm-hmm.
Microshift is OpenShift on ARM. I don't know if it's exclusively ARM or not, Christian. I know most people think of it in terms of ARM and things like a Raspberry Pi and stuff like that. It's a good question. We'll have to pencil that one down for when the Microshift guys come on.
Yeah, it's definitely geared towards the edge target, right? That's really ultimately what we're trying to get after with Microshift, is just getting at the edge.
Yeah. Yeah, Christian is reassuring me that it is, so I believe you. I believe you.
Christian's angry.
Yeah. All right. So that's all the top of mind topics we had today. So let's talk about OpenShift 4.10. As I said, there's I'm looking at our notes doc with the outline that we create for each one of these shows, and there's like 15, 20 things here that we can talk about. So I'm going to try and cherry pick some things out that I think are important. And, for anybody who's listening to us, please don't hesitate to ask questions or, ask for clarification on anything that's interesting to you as well. And to be clear, we also have at least one, and I think more like 2 or 3 streams planned to focus specifically on some 4.10 features. So one of those is Metal LB using BGP. So sometimes you'll see this called Metal LB L3 node or BGP Metal LB, stuff like that. So BGP is it's a big topic, right? Just BGP, right? Just the border gateway protocol, routing thing. And then how that interacts with Metal LB, we didn't feel like we could do it justice crammed into a show like this with a bunch of other things. So we're going to have a whole show dedicated just to that. So stay tuned for that one as well. That could be next week or it could be in 3 weeks. I don't know. So with that being said, let's talk about a few things. So let me pull up. I've got an OpenShift 4.10 cluster here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is, real quickly, if you want to get hands-on with OpenShift 4.10 today, anybody can do that, right? So let me share my screen here. And if we come back over to our tab here with the, where's my screen at? There we go. So I'm back on my tab from console.redhat.com. So if I go to clusters, if I click create cluster, kind of doesn't matter which one of these I select. So we'll go with vSphere, and then I want installer provisioned infrastructure. And again, it doesn't matter which one of those I select. I can select user provisioned as well, because what we're looking for is this download pre-release builds option. And that will take us over to exactly what it says, pre-release builds, right? So here I can download installer. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to copy this link address. And if I open a new tab and paste it in, I'm going to remove the file name, because really what I want to show you is this is just on the OpenShift mirror, the standard OpenShift mirror. And it takes us out to this OCP dev preview / pre-release folder. And in here you can download all of those. And you can see currently it's 4.10.0 RC7. So you can kind of, bookmark these links. I have a bad habit of constantly browsing directly to mirror.openshift.com and downloading these things, but the official way of doing it would be as I showed, which is going through the console. But anyways, so you can download this. Once you have that, you install it just like a regular OpenShift cluster, right? It'll come out and it'll look. So this one happens to be on Azure. You can see that we've got 4.10 RC7. This was a cluster I deployed this morning. So one thing, or probably the only thing that you'll notice about this, assuming everything works correctly, I got a failed pod down here for some reason, is if you go to cluster settings, you'll have an error here about how there's no stable 4.10 channel, which kind of makes sense because it's not GA. So yeah, but otherwise, it should behave pretty much exactly the same as you would expect with any standard OpenShift deployment. Just remember, being RC, being pre-release, it's not a supported deployment. All right. So that's how to get 4.10 bits if you want to get hands-on. The next thing I want to show is I want to share my terminal window here. And the reason I want to share this terminal window is because I noticed something that was really cool. So if we look here, and we'll wait for that window to show up in the stream. Oh, did my console window or terminal window not show up?
Come on, little buddy.
Let me try and reshare it. Window, terminal window, and no, that's there. I don't know, Stephanie, are we?
Do you want to try and share mine? I have the install log if you want to see that.
Do you? Yeah, that's all I was trying to share was the install log.
Let me see if I can fail spectacularly. So let's. All right, there you go. Can you see it?
I see your lovely face, but I don't see. Hey, there we go. Oh, that one's mine. Okay. Yeah, either one is fine. So let's see. So yeah, go ahead and scroll down. And so what you're looking at here, this is, I'm assuming this is the log. Yeah.
It's install log. Do you want me to go all the way to the bottom or?
Yeah, I think so. I think what we want will be in there.
So this is the bottom of the file.
Yeah, so if you look there, there's a line maybe 10 up from the bottom, and it says waiting up to 10 minutes, 0 seconds. And one of the big changes here is you see it says until a specific time. I thought that was a really cool addition. Like of, hey, it tells you before it just said I'm waiting up to 10 minutes, and you had no idea when that 10-minute countdown started and when it's going to end. So now, of course, you don't have that issue. You can tell exactly when it'll expire, and you can move on from there. The other thing I noticed, at least with my cluster deployment, is the debug output was slightly less verbose. That could be just because my deployment went faster than normal. I don't know. But it used to be that there'd be like a huge slew of info message or debug messages as it's initializing the cluster. So I don't know if we changed the threshold for that, or maybe just the deployment went faster than normal. But again, slightly different things in the deployment process.
I mean, if you look here, the cluster deployed in 30 minutes, right? That seems at least a good 4 to 5 minutes faster than what I've seen in AWS consistently.
Yeah, same for mine deployed to Azure, and it deployed in 41 minutes.
Yeah, and that's pretty fast for Azure.
Yeah, that's between 10 and 20 minutes faster than normal for Azure. I don't know why Azure is slower, but it is. So yeah, I hopefully that means good things, and it's not just a fluke, anything like that. So getting the bits, installing them, you'll notice some differences. Johnny, if you're connected in your cluster, one thing I noticed, I think this started with 4.9. Like if you do an OC get CO, it now shows additional details about each one of the cluster operators.
All right, let me do this.
Yeah, so there's that message column way out on the right-hand side.
Yep. Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you hadn't seen that, as it's going through and doing updates and upgrades or anything like that, it'll tell you specific messages about the status of the operator. So before you would just see, it's, available, false, progressing, true. And then you have to go and do an OC, describe or an OC get -o YAML on the operator to see the specific status message. Now it'll print them right here. I found that super useful because my cluster actually broke this morning, or didn't fully deploy this morning, I should say. So it's pre-release. It's okay if it didn't fully deploy.
Yep, exactly. No, this is nice. I'm glad we're starting to do some of this stuff, because I think getting some of this output, especially when you're doing a disconnected install, a lot of times we'll watch this, and we're watching these operators deploy just to get an idea of like where we're at in the deployment cycle. So I'm glad that we're actually going to start getting some information out here. That's cool.
It's quality of life things, right? So yeah, making our lives a little bit easier, one step at a time.
That's right. Baby steps.
All right, so let's switch back over to my browser here. All right, so this is, again, just my 4.10 RC7 release. One of the things I wanted to highlight here is, and let me switch over to the documentation tab here. So CSI is now largely generally available inside of OpenShift as of 4.10. So if we go to understanding persistent storage up here, and nope, that's not the one I want. I want this one. I think it's this one. Yeah, if we scroll down through here, so we've got all of this CSI driver volume snapshots and all that other stuff, dynamic provisioning. This talks about each one of the drivers and what they're supported with, right? Which features are supported. So the slide has the specific drivers that went GA. I want to say all of the ones listed here are GA, but it'll tell you at the top whether or not they are. So if I select Azure Disk, for example, you see there's no big red box saying that this is tech preview. So we can see here, it defaults to using an in-tree non-CSI plugin to provision Azure Disk Storage. So if we look at my cluster and I come over here to storage classes, you'll notice that I now have 4 storage classes instead of just 1 like I used to before. So previously, I would only have this managed premium storage class. This is the in-tree provisioner that's happening there. We now have these new CSI storage classes that are here. You can, of course, change this to the default, or change the default to be one of these others. You can also change different properties about them. I don't know what the properties are, but let's say you wanted to change the reclaim policy to retain or something like that, or the SKU name to standard or whatever the other disk type is. So you can change those, but just like with all of the storage classes that are deployed and managed at install time, the cluster storage operator will ensure that they're always present. So if I were to go in, for example, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. If I were to go in and delete this guy, what we should see happen is it'll get recreated if it even deleted it at all. Are you going to delete for me? But the issue with that is when it recreates these, it will reset their values. So for example, if you change the defaults to say this managed CSI, and then you go in and you delete this managed premium, when it recreates it, it's likely to set it back to the default. I say likely because that used to be the behavior. I don't want to assume that it's continuing to do that. But just be aware that it could cause an unexpected result for some of those. So CSI, GA. I'm super happy about that. As you saw over here, if we look, where did that go? If we look at this configuring CSI volumes, this adds a bunch of different capabilities, not the least of which snapshots, cloning, and resize, depending on which driver you happen to be using. So you see I'm using Azure Disk. We can do all 3 of those features, all 3 of those functions. So really, really useful. So the Red Hat virtualization, that CSI driver has been GA for a while. So that's not a new one. But I know the Azure Disk one is new, AWS is new, Alley Cloud is new, OpenStack Cinder has been present or supported for a while, as has the OCS ODF one. So you notice that VMware vSphere, there's no checkboxes here because it doesn't support these features, but it is also a generally available CSI driver. And I want to take a minute to talk about that. So it's safe to say that, there's a lot of OpenShift on vSphere deployments out there. And a lot of folks have decided to, and rightfully so, there's no issue with it, deploy the upstream VMware CSI driver into their cluster. It'll absolutely work. We've talked about it here on the show at least twice, if not 3 times. And so far as we know, it works great for folks. So as we move towards a future where in-tree drivers simply don't exist, that means that Red Hat will be deploying, as you're now seeing, literally just with this Azure cluster, that we will begin deploying CSI drivers out of the box. And those CSI drivers are supported by Red Hat, which means that, like we do with everything, we create a downstream of that. And the same is true for AWS and Azure and vSphere and all of those others, right? We have an OpenShift VMware CSI driver. So where this gets complex is in a couple of different ways. So first, I've mentioned before that we all need to take our clusters that have been created in 4.9 and earlier and begin doing VM hardware upgrades. So with VMware, the CSI driver requires that we use VM hardware version 15 or later, which also means you need to be on vSphere version 6.7 or later. So step one today, as you're making your upgrades into 4.10, as that CSI driver goes GA, we need to start, doing that virtual hardware upgrade process, and that'll be fully documented as when it comes out. So with 4.11, what you're going to see is a migration process become available. So it's in tech preview today. In 4.11, it's expected to go GA. So what that means is today you're going to have some volumes. If you're upgrading a cluster, you're probably going to have some existing volumes that are either provisioned by the entry provisioner or by the upstream VMware CSI provisioner. When you upgrade to 4.10, no change, everything works great. That's phenomenal. You will have the option of deploying the Red Hat VMware CSI provisioner, the OpenShift VMware CSI provisioner. When you do that, it will uninstall the upstream VMware one. In 4.11, we will GA the ability to migrate in-tree volumes to CSI volumes. And that's not just for VMware, that's for a lot of the other provisioners as well. But just be aware that like upgrades and the console will tell you about it, right? So if you saw over here, the console will tell you if it detects something. In my instance, I've turned on the tech preview thing, but it will tell you that, hey, you cannot upgrade, and here's why. So just be aware that like to go from 4.10 to 4.11, when the CSI provisioner becomes mandatory, you'll have to have all of those prerequisites met. So VM hardware version 15 and all of that other stuff. So again, please prepare now, be aware of this. Hopefully it is not disruptive. You can always, ask questions, open support cases, all that other stuff. The storage engineering team has done a great job of preparing us for that. So, and then 4.12, 4.13, it's the it's the VMware, the OpenShift VMware CSI driver all the time. So, looking forward to that. Should be interesting. And CSI is, I would say, maybe I'm slightly biased because I came from a storage company. CSI, the CSI provisioners are way more powerful and way more capable. Yeah. All right. I've spent long enough on that topic. Hopefully, if anybody has any questions or anything like that, don't hesitate to reach out. I have this conversation semi-regularly, so I feel comfortable having it again and again and again, as the case may be. All right. So what are some other things that are changing or that have changed with OpenShift 4.10? So one thing to note is that NMState is now GA with an asterisk. So what do I mean by that? So the network management state operator, NMState operator, right, is or has been GA since OpenShift virtualization was released in 4.6. But only when used with OpenShift virtualization, right? So it had to be a bare metal cluster or a physical cluster. You had to deploy the OpenShift virtualization operator. It would deploy NMState as a dependency of that. With 4.10, they're broadening that to include all bare metal clusters, right? So you can deploy onto bare metal. I don't know if I have it in the docs here or not. Unfortunately, I can't search these docs because they're the pre-release docs, and the search doesn't work because it's not public. Let's see, networking, and I want OVN Kubernetes. Nope, Kubernetes NMState. Yeah, so you can see here, in production environments on bare metal platform installations only, right? For other platforms, it is a technology preview or continues to be a technology preview. So this is important, and it's a big change for a couple of reasons. So first and foremost, you can, when deploying bare metal, you can actually introduce those configurations as a part of the install config.yaml. So this is kind of cool in that if I am deploying to a physical server that has, physical servers tend to have, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 network adapters, and I need to create a bond and I need to create a VLAN interface, and on that VLAN interface is where my cluster's primary interface is going to reside. We can now define all of that in the install config, and NMState will apply that during install. So it makes it much easier than before, where the only answer before was deploy the live ISO and boot to that, and then use NMCLI or NM2E to do that. So now we can do it kind of natively directly in the install config. I haven't looked. I have no idea if it's actually. Let's see if it's in the bare metal docs here. Installing on bare metal. User provisioned cluster on bare metal. Let's see. NMState. No, it doesn't show anything. So simple config files. Maybe they haven't updated this docs page yet. So a little secret about the docs. So if you're sharp-eyed, I know it's hard to see on the stream. I'm pointed at the 4.10 link. So if I were to just browse to docs.openshift.com and I select version, there is no 4.10. So version 4.10 is actually protected by a HT, a password. So not everybody can use it. But if you go to GitHub and the OpenShift org, and then we search for OpenShift docs, you can cheat. You can look at the pull requests that are in here, and you can find pull requests for things that you're interested in, right? So let's see. Here, removing 3 network adapters from SRIOV. And inside of each one of these, there's going to be a preview link. So I can click that, and it'll take me over and show me the preview of what those documents look like. So I bring this up because I was actually using it to cheat for IBM Cloud IPI. So like this was how I figured out how to deploy onto IBM Cloud using IPI. So if you're interested, if you're one of those folks who wants to deploy, a version of OpenShift pre-GA, and you can't find the docs, this is one way to access those docs. I don't know what's taking Netlify, whatever the service is, NETLIFY. I don't know why it's taking so long for that page to load, but that is the way that we can see pre-release docs. So
Tricks of the trade.
Yeah, I won't let that sit there and churn any longer. Let's see, platforms. What do we want to talk about next, Johnny? Here's one that I think a lot of people will like. So I'm going to share my console again. Let's switch to here. And by the way, it's okay that I shared my kubeadmin password here because I used Andy Block's process to change it before. I knew I was going to be showing it.
That's awesome.
All right. So inside of here, I've got I'm just going to do a simple, OpenShift install version. So I'm using the 4.10 RC7. I'm going to do an OpenShift install create ignition. Nope, I want install config. Right. So I'm just going to generate an install config file. So yes, we're going to use that. I want to deploy to vSphere. So my vCenter is going to be this guy. And what I'm choosing, I'm not actually going to deploy this. So what I choose here is really irrelevant. And get there eventually. So pull secret, another little secret if you don't want to use a real pull secret is to grab, so the OKD docs have it fits the right JSON format to pass whatever check they're doing here without actually using a pull secret. So Johnny, for those of us who share these things, on broadcasts all the time.
That's right.
So what I've got here is this. I now have an install config.yaml, right? If I do a less on that, you can see it's pretty standard what's inside of here, right? So let's exit out of that. And what I want to show you is if I do a OpenShift install explain install config. platform.vsphere. And so if you're not familiar with the explain, so both OC, OpenShift install, all of the commands have that. And it does exactly what it says. It explains as you walk through the YAML tree of whatever object you're looking at, it tells you what each option, each value happens to be. And what I want to show you here is this disk type option. So historically, if you deploy a OpenShift, in particular IPI cluster, it will create that, it will deploy the OVF and it'll deploy it to a data store that is going to inherit the disk type, as we're calling it here, but really it's the, we'll call it disk type, from the data store. So if it's a block-based data store, it'll be a quote unquote thick, right? If it is a file-based data store, so NFS, it'll be a thin disk. So this is sometimes good and sometimes bad, right? If I'm deploying to an iSCSI or Fiber Channel data store, that's 2, 5, 10 terabytes in size, and I'm wanting to provision 501 terabyte drives for my OpenShift nodes. That's a lot of space to consume initially without, and it may or may not be what I want. Maybe I want thin provisioning. So there's ways that you can work around that day two by converting the disk type and all that, but they added in an option. So now we can do it directly from here. So disk type is thin. So what I want to do here now is I'm going to edit our install config. All the way down here, we'll add the option of thin. Now, when I actually go to deploy that, what I should see here in just a moment, if this works, there we go. So it's going to download that OVA file real quick, hopefully real quick. Hopefully it's not affecting my bandwidth for the live stream. That should be fine. It's gigabit internet. It's fine, right?
Taking down the internet right now. That's what's going on.
Yeah. So Khalid, how can we automate the UPI deployment? IPI? No, I'm kidding. So there are a number of folks who have published unofficial methods of automating UPI using things like Ansible and some other ways as well. So one of those, I think there is one. Let me check. So
yeah, I use Terraform too, Waleed.
So one of those, I think, let me switch which screen I'm sharing here, or which window I'm sharing. I want to go with this guy. All right, so all I did here was I went to github.com/Red Hat official, which is the official GitHub account for Red Hat, as it says here, but many of these repositories are created, managed, and maintained by the community of practice, which means that they are Red Hat people, but they're creating unofficial and unsupported type of offerings. So I bring this up, and they should have a disclaimer. They usually always have so this repo is most ideal for home lab and proof of concept scenarios. So here's one example of, vSphere UPI automation. I think this one is Ansible based, if I remember correctly. I'll post that link here into Twitch. There's a number of folks who have created these types of things. Look in the community. You could probably do a Google or DuckDuckGo search and find a number of those. This happens to be one that I remember regularly. So what I want to check here is, do I have, what's going on with that deployment? Where'd my window go? Let's do a refresh. Yeah, so here I've got my virtual machines, so for my test cluster. And if I go to edit settings here and I click on hard disk, you see that it is a thin provision disk. Yay! And normally I would not be able to deploy a cluster into that that data store because it's an iSCSI data store, and it's just not big enough to hold all the disks for all the VMs. So I'm super happy about this. I know it's something that we've been asking for like 4 releases or something. Like I think since IPI came out.
Yeah.
So good news, it's there. You can now thin provision your OpenShift deployments. I would feel slightly guilty if I don't remind folks, however, that thin provisioning is a concentrator of IOPS. So remember that your data store, the underlying data store, does need to have the capacity, not gigabytes capacity, but IOPS and latency capacity for that workload. etcd is notorious for wanting low latency IO. So, if you're now cramming, because thin provisioning, you're cramming, 2, 3, 5, 10 OpenShift clusters and their etcd into one data store, just be aware of that impact to performance. So, yeah, I'm happy about this. Love it for my lab, but I know there's a lot of folks who also use it and wanted it for their enterprise environment too. Waleed, favorite feature out of 4.10. Johnny, any? I'm gonna throw you under the bus first.
So I've got two. One because I'm biased, and then the other one, well, really both because I'm biased. But the first one is like the mirror registry coming out and being a part of that to help the disconnected deployments, right? Because it's near and dear to my heart. Like it's something that I've struggled with for a long time, and I know people struggle with it all the time, and so I think just that having that component now that's a legit registry that we can put out there and actually do stuff with, I think that's an awesome update. And then it's a tech preview feature that's coming out, and that's going to be OC Mirror. And I'm biased because I know all those people that worked on that project, and they are doing some awesome work. They're doing God's work, with the OC Mirror and getting all the images and stuff like that collected. So really happy that they were able to get that going, because it's an awesome feature.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with two as well. So one is middle LB using BGP. That one's really cool, and it fills a huge on-prem gap. Hey, I need to. If anybody watched the Level Up Hour earlier today, they were showing, SQL Server, and hey, I need to expose ports 1433. The standard SQL Server port. Well, you can't with a route, because that's limited to port 80 and 443. Doing it with a node port, word sucks, right? That's just it's difficult. It works, but it's not the best way. So Meadow LB, and especially with BGP mode, now I can actually expose all of the ports that I need, and it's a true load balancer type of thing, right? Christian threw out the phrase earlier of like it's a true load balancing type of capability that operates at the network level. I will say, Andrew, old school Andrew, having worked with a lot of smart network guys, but that being close to a decade ago, like I had some trepidation about BGP and what that looks like. We've all heard stories of Facebook and one of the CDNs, and like multiple really big, really smart sets of organizations have broken things by via BGP. So I will say I absolutely have some trepidation about that, but the capability there is just so powerful.
Yeah.
So the other one, which is one that I'm working on, or I was working towards, is EUS to EUS updates. So 4.10 is now the first EUS after 4.8. So remember, even versions are not EUS. So if you're on 4.8, you can do an accelerated update between those two versions. So we've talked about that before. The short version is what it does if you're doing 4.8 to 4.10 upgrades is it pauses updates for compute nodes. And it does, for the control plane, it does the 4.8 to 4.9 to 4.10 update. And then for the compute nodes, when it's, for lack of a better term, unpauses those, it will do a single reboot to go from 4.8 to 4.10. So particularly for folks that have larger clusters, and by larger, I mean, 10, 20, 30, 50, 150 nodes, rebooting all those nodes can take a long time. Even more so if you're running hardware, right? Even with just a handful of physical nodes in your cluster, hardware takes ages to reboot, and physical servers with, a terabyte or 2 or 6 of physical RAM, that's a long time to reboot. So I'm super happy to see this. It'll hopefully bring down those update times pretty dramatically for folks. So yeah, that would be my two.
Yeah, that's the EUS updates, and then the other one is the conditional updating. I think that that's an awesome feature as well. Like to finally give people that warning, like, hey, this could go really bad. You could do this, but
yeah, that's a good point. So that came out of when we were having the royal right, of both Red Hat and VMware. We had some releases where, specifically with VMware, the RHEL kernel driver for VMXNet 3 was just flaky. And you remember, like, that was what caused I think it was 4.7 or 4.8 release into stable to take like an extra 2 or 3 weeks, because we had to sort out that problem and get it resolved before we could turn on stable updates. So now with conditional updates, basically it'll say, before it was an all or nothing. Even if you were deployed onto OpenStack or Rev or AWS, stable was blocked for everybody because of an issue on one platform. Now it's, hey, there's these known issues. Are you sure you want to update? Right. And yes, I want to update. That doesn't affect me, type of thing. I think you could always technically do that. It was just a much more obscure way of doing it. It wouldn't give you those warnings. It wouldn't give you that, hey, there's these other things that are affecting other things. So, or these issues that are affecting other platforms. So yeah, conditional updates was another one. Let's see, I'm looking through our list. When you see me look off to my left, that's what I'm looking at, is our list of things to talk about today. So Johnny, other things for you? I'm going to quickly look through chat.
Yeah, I think that just really kind of like we can just touch on is like the cert manager support, where it looks like the quote from the document was like, they're making certificate management a first-class citizen in OpenShift, which I think is like long overdue. I think that we've always handled the API and the internal certificates really, really well. And I think with OpenShift 4, especially the way that we've simplified updating the ingress controller and then updating the API certs is really great. But having something that can like automatically renew those fors, like certbot or cert manager, I think that that's going to be really great for all of our users and administrators out there that hate certificates, like 90% of us. So I think that that's an awesome feature that's coming up, and it's tech preview right now. And so I'm just looking forward to seeing that mature and really get rolled out. And it's going to be a nice feature.
The OpenSSL command is like, that's arcane magic to me.
Oh yeah.
I've been using that command for 20 years and I still just barely understand it.
Yeah. I know like a handful of them. I can do like the S client connect, and then I can do like if I need to look at a cert to see if it's valid or not, I can do that. That's about the extent of it.
Yep. No, and the iSCSI CLI is about the same, right?
Oh my God. Don't even get me started on that. Yeah.
Let's see. Hamantha, and apologies if I am butchering anybody's name. Latest OpenShift versions are draining resources in the VMware environment. Is there any plan to optimize? So I will say yes, but I don't know what I can share on that respect. So I would suggest looking at the most recent What's Next post. So let me find that again and post that link. So let me post this into Twitch real quick. So I would encourage you to look at the What's New, or excuse me, What's Next, the roadmap presentation. There should be another one coming up relatively soon. I want to say in the next maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And what you're going to look for is things like composable OpenShift and all of that. So yes, it's something that we are interested in, that we're looking at. There's also efforts. We talked about microshift before. Christian highlighted it's ARM only though, but we are aware, and they are working towards reducing that footprint. And making it easier to reduce that footprint. So, hey, I don't need this service, let's not deploy it, type of thing.
We got a question. It was from, all right, at least that's Sean. I'm going to go with Sean. And it says, which cert do you recommend for a beginner to get into OpenShift? I can jump on this if you want, or if you want to give your insight, that's cool too. I agree. Like with Rockhound, CKA is a great place to get started, especially if you just want to learn Kubernetes, as just a platform. CKA and CKAD are both really good. CKAD is more geared towards, the application developer. So you're going to spin up a lot of config maps, a lot of secrets, attaching them to, your applications and stuff like that. CKA is more administrator focused. So you think about like updating a cluster, adding nodes to a cluster, deploying clusters using kubeadmin. Where if you look at it more Red Hat specific, the EX180 is very Podman and like early OpenShift focused. And then I think it's 280 is where it's the OpenShift admin, but it kind of jumps like into some almost like you have to have some existing knowledge to get going. But it does give you like an excellent rundown of a lot of the features within OpenShift and like routes and the things that are specific to the OpenShift API. And then for an application developer in OpenShift, it's the DO288, and that's a CKAD equivalent in OpenShift. So I think any of those are a good place to start. And they're all great courses. You're muted, Andrew.
Thank you. I hear myself perfectly fine. It was a phenomenal conversation. Yeah. So I'm going to share my browser window real quick. So let's see. And we want to go to learn.redhat.com. And the reason why I want to go here, this is kind of my default for all things. So if you look at the, it's been so long since I was here that I don't even remember now. We want to find the OpenShift certification path. Might be better off just searching for it. But let's see, skill paths. Here we go. So this kind of walks you through all of the things that Johnny just said. At a minimum, I always recommend folks do this DO080. You see, it's free. Anybody can go and take it. You don't have to pay anything. It kind of gives you that just getting your feet wet, getting started with OpenShift and containers and Kubernetes and all that other stuff, and then you can kind of go from there. But you see the EX180, which I think Waleed recommended. I think for a lot of people, unless you're going to be, it depends on your role, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're the lead administrator for an OpenShift cluster or clusters, then yeah, you're probably going to want to go with something, pursue all the way up to like a 280 or something. If you're a junior administrator, maybe start with the EX180 and, learn from there. The good news is, and as Johnny said, and I think some others have said as well, OpenShift is Kubernetes, which means if you go and you do like the CKA, the Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam, like 98% of that is going to apply to OpenShift as well. Really, it's only the things like routes and stuff that we add on top that
it translates extremely well.
And vice versa, right? If you go and take the DO180 or the other courses here, most of that knowledge is going to translate if you want to go and also get a CKA or a CKD or something like that.
So one thing that Andrew did earlier that I think it's a really great, it's built in and it's been there for a long time, is the explain option, right? So like kubectl explain, if you do that with the resource type, so kubectl explain deployment, and then you do -- recursive, that will actually give you everything that like what he was able to dump out from the install config. So when you're going through and you're like, oh man, I don't know if this is supposed to be a map or if this is supposed to be an array or like what's the actual field name, like it'll give you all of that information. And then that works with OC, that works with kubectl, which Andrew showed earlier. I think it's a great feature that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, and just to because I learned this. Remember when we had Ali on? You can also go into here and you can create those inside of here, and it will pre-populate things for you. So if I create a build, right, it's got all of the schema, it's got everything that I need over here. I can click details, and it'll tell me exactly what I need in here. And you can even create custom examples and stuff like that if you need to. So if you want to use the GUI to do it, great. If you want to use the CLI to do it, great. But that information is available in both places. Somebody, who was it? Somebody was just saying that they missed the raw count. I missed the instant learn.OpenShift instances. So they should still work. So if anybody who's curious, you can go to learn.openshift.com, if I can type. It redirects now over to developers.redhat.com. And if you scroll down, we have this interactive lessons. I can hit this OpenShift 4.9 playground, and then I hit this launch button, And I always get confused by this because you see that that's not visible here. There's nothing that says, oh, scroll down a little bit and click that button. So sometimes you'll be able to start one of these right away. Sometimes it has to spin one up in the background, but usually it's not more than a few minutes, and then you can click in and do what you need to do. I use those all the time. If I don't have a lab deployed or a cluster deployed in my lab or on AWS or something, I go in and click these, and I use them to answer questions and figure stuff out. So, yeah, I'm always happy to evangelize for the stuff that they've got going on here. And if we go back to the all courses, you see that they've got just a massive number of things inside of here. Here, poke around the OpenShift web console. See, there's the playground. So, anyways, let's see. I in the interest of time, because we're 6 minutes after 12 here on the East Coast, it's one other thing that is exciting to you, Johnny.
Let's see. Oh, the ACM hub and backup. That's going to be awesome. So we had, oh man, I can't remember her name now. Dang it. It was just at the tip of my tongue. We had her on a couple weeks ago.
Yep. Annette.
Yeah. I was thinking Antoinette. Okay, good. So we had Annette on a couple weeks ago, and she went over the backup and restore using ODF in the cluster. I think having, multi-cluster support with using OADP, I think that's just going to be a huge feature for our customers, especially as we start deploying, in number of clusters going down the road. We don't have to worry about them blowing up. We can actually recover from something like that.
Yep. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say two things. One is GA and one is tech preview. So GA is ARM.
Yes.
So OpenShift on ARM in AWS, as well as bare metal ARM is GA. I think that's awesome.
I agree. I have a good friend, Derek, and he's all about ARM deployments, and so I think that he's probably getting excited.
Yeah. It's I know for AWS, it's one of those hey, it's dramatically cheaper, especially for the type of stuff that I do. Right, I'm constantly creating and destroying clusters, so we can spin those up for much less. So the other thing, so tech preview, and the reason why, if you saw earlier that I had the tech preview feature gate enabled, I didn't have time to deploy it because it's actually dependent on, and I didn't realize this at first, is dependent on ACM 2.5. But they kind of talked about it during the What's New presentation, but I want to re-highlight it. And that's if you've ever used Cockpit and you've connected Cockpit to multiple servers, right? Up in the upper corner, you'll have this drop down where you can say which server you want to connect to. And, I want to connect over to, server X. And it's all the Cockpit options, but you're just using one cluster as sort of the hub for that. So you can do the same thing with ACM and ACM 2.5 and OpenShift 4.10 in tech preview. So effectively, if you have more than one cluster defined in ACM, you'll have a little drop down up here for the console, and you can say which cluster you want to connect to. So it's been a while. It was like one of the first shows you were joined me as the co-host, Johnny, where somebody was asking, how do you keep all of your cluster consoles straight? And we were showing using banners and stuff like that.
Yep.
Well, now you can see there'll be a drop down up here that'll tell you specifically here's the cluster you're on, and you'll have access to all the normal stuff from inside there. I thought that was super cool.
It is really awesome.
DMI3, can we mix architectures? Control plane on x86 and worker on ARM? Not yet. So that is not something today. They do need to be homogeneous, but it is something that they're looking at. I think ARM is the first one that they're targeting, rather than P and Z. And that is in the roadmap. If you look at the roadmap slides. So I don't know when they're targeting it, but it is in there. Will image content source policy support name tags? I think you asked that at the beginning, Rockhound, and we might have missed it. So thank you for asking again. So I asked this the other day, and I believe the response was actually no. We asked it when we were talking about or when we were talking to Daniel, and Daniel said maybe from what I remember. I'll have to double check with him and follow up. So I don't want to say yes or no because I don't remember the answer that he had, and I don't want to give you an incorrect answer. So please watch for the blog post, or the next week we'll talk about it in the top of mind topics, just to confirm. Our Hope 9, yeah, thank you for linking that deck or that slide in the What's New presentation. So that is the high level overview there. And let me copy that link address and paste it in here. Yeah, if you look at that, so here's that upper right. I don't think I can maximize this or full screen it. No. So here's that upper right-hand corner, just like with Cockpit. You can choose which cluster you're connected to and have access to all of those features, all the things that you're used to managing. So I was hoping to have it deployed and ready today for this stream, and I didn't realize that I had to deploy a pre-release version of ACM in order to get it at 2.5. So I just ran out of time. So Hayes Anderson, yeah, it's interesting. That's good to know on Twitch that there's a new category for software and game development. So we will take that into account. So with that being said, I don't have anything else. So we'll post a list of the list of things that we talked about into the blog post. We'll link into where in the stream we talked about all of those things. There'll also be a few other things that we didn't cover here. As well as we've got several other, future streams planned around specific features and expanding on those in more depth, like Metal LB and BGP. So in the future, for now, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask those here in chat. Get those last questions out. We'll do our best to answer those.
We got two more.
Okay. So in the meantime, if you don't want to ask publicly here in chat, if you don't think of something as you're watching this afterwards, maybe not live on one of the recordings, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via social media. So you can reach me at Practical Andrew, just like you've seen my username on Twitch there, on Twitter. You can also, Johnny and I have started stalking Reddit, so the OpenShift subreddit, and of course on email. So you can reach me, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. So you said there was two questions, Johnny? And
There's one from Tiger about the kubeadmin password rotation. I tried to post a link in YouTube earlier, and it's not getting redirected. So if you just want to repost the link. And then the second question was adding the Windows nodes to existing clusters.
So I don't know if Christian is still on. I think, as far as I know, that bring your own Windows node is GA. I think Christian would be the one to confirm that because he's the Windows nodes guru. I like to throw him under the bus.
That's right. And then Rockhound 1 just asked if the offline installer IPI for OCP is coming as a single package.
That's a good question. I don't know. You and I think briefly talked about something like that yesterday, Johnny. Just kind of unofficial of. I suspect, so to be clear, this is Andrew, like assuming, guessing, right? Not authoritative in any way. I don't know if we will consolidate more than the OC mirror set of commands. So basically what we're looking at in 4.10 in a mixture of GA and tech preview is there is the OpenShift mirror registry. So one command to go and deploy a standalone Quay instance. Then there will be the OC mirror command. So now it's mirror all of the data that you need into that mirror registry. Pick that registry up and move it to the disconnected environment, and now you have everything that you need over there. I would love for all of that to be in one. Andrew's personal thoughts, and Johnny, I mentioned this when we talked yesterday about it, is OpenShift is big. A full OpenShift, right? If you were to download all of the images, it's something like 10 or 12 gigabytes. So, shipping that in one binary or one tar gzipped package that you put onto a host would be a lot. And it's one of those, the packages, the images are constantly being updated. So that package would either always be out of date, or you're constantly having to re-download a 10 gigabyte file that has everything inside of it. So to me, that makes it impractical, as much as I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, I think with OC Mirror, they're doing some work which actually helps with the compression and the way that they're, if an image has UBI8 or whatever, right? Like it'll only pull that once and then essentially cache it for every other image. So it does help kind of shrink it down. But to your point, right, from I mean, even yesterday to today, the release candidates for OpenShift 4.10, they changed overnight. So it's like every day you'll be, deprecated essentially or out of date.
Yeah, rock down when you're air gapped. This is a challenge in general, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
I know that pain.
So, and to that point too, right? Like if you're pulling down a 10 gig file, you're gonna have to split that file, most likely to get it through your security. So that way, if you have to burn it to a DVD, or if you're that restrictive, which a lot of our customers are, I mean, that's a lot of overhead on the administrator side as well. That I think can cause some problems. Or it does cause problems.
Mm-hmm. Fahad, for the Mirror registry, would you need a dedicated server? No. I think the minimum requirements are 2 CPUs and 8 gigabytes of RAM for Quay. Excuse me. But other than that, yeah, it literally spins up Quay running in Podman. So you can do other things with that server if you like, particularly if you have more than the bare minimum requirement or resources. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, if you have any questions, anything that we weren't able to get to today, please don't hesitate to reach out through any of the various platforms. Email is always great, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com or Johnny, Jonny, @redhat.com. Happy to answer those questions. Happy to do what we can to help you out. Today's show, I hope, has been helpful. If there is anything that you are curious about around 4.10, any features, functions, capabilities, etc., that you're interested in, send them over to us. Like I said, we plan on spending some time on 4.10 and 4.11 when it eventually comes out. So if there's things that are interesting to you, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out. That being said, be sure to subscribe for our shows in the future on things like Microshift, Service Mesh, etc. I'm excited about those shows. Service Mesh is something we've been talking about for like a year. So, and Microshift is something that's just exciting in general. So, all of that being said, thank you, Stephanie, in the background. Appreciate your help today. And Johnny, I'll leave you with the last word.
Yeah, it's a great episode today. Everybody, thank you for participating. All the questions are awesome. It makes these things fly by. And, we love obviously talking about the tech stuff. So, glad that you guys are showing up and we're able to help out. So see you next week.